Good evening and welcome to the Arundel Camera Club live stream for Wednesday, March 25th, 2020. My name is John Milliker and I'm the program's coordinator for the 2019-2020 season. The Arundel Camera Club was founded in 1957 and exists to promote the art, science, and education in all aspects and fields of photography. Normally we meet 7 p.m. every Wednesday evening during the school year at the Severna Park High School in Severna Park, Maryland. However, with the current disruptions, we've decided to continue business as normal in a virtual space, which allows us to protect our members and guests from the current COVID-19 situation. For more information about us, please visit www.arundelcameraclub.org. Before we get to our topic of the scheduled program for tonight on design principles in photography, we have a few announcements to cover from our club president, Chip Bulgin. Chip says club officers are working on contingency plans to hold the club events and end-of-year contests via video conferencing. We are also working out how to address the business meeting, either by both postponing it or holding it virtually, which admittedly will be a little bit more complicated. Also, in the event that we have to cancel the end-of-year banquet, we will hold some sort of virtual banquet online by showing the end-of-year awards via slideshow. Keep in mind that if we do hold a virtual banquet, Chip jokes that we may ask all attendees to send photos of themselves sitting in their favorite chair holding their favorite beverages during the stream. Chip also wants to remind us that the new Maryland governor order limiting social gatherings is to 10 people or fewer, and authorities are vigorously enforcing it. If you are not located in Maryland, be sure you are aware of the laws in your location if you decide to go out. Our contest coordinator, Louis Sapienza, asked that I remind everyone of the contest details and changes. It has been decided by club officers that in the interest of safety, all print contests have been ended for the remainder of the club year. Our next digital photography contest is April 1st, and the space that was reserved for our print contest on April 15th will now be turned into a program. Michelle Barkdahl, who is our field trips coordinator and part of our media team, has asked me to recognize new Facebook group members from our friends at the Delaware Coastal Camera Club, the Montgomery County Camera Club, and the DC Camera Club. If you are watching us from another club or just visiting us on your own, please introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're watching from. Upcoming events. Our field trip for this weekend was to visit the Patuxent Research Refuge's now canceled Spring Festival, and while the visitor center will be closed, the grounds and trails will be open, and several members have expressed interest in still visiting. If you decide with your best judgment that you'd like to go out of the house and visit the refuge, keep in mind that your decision is at your own risk, and we remind you to keep to 10 people or less and social distancing of at least 6 feet apart. Next week on Wednesday, April 1st at 7 p.m. will be our April digital contest. The contest will be held via live stream right here on our Facebook group. The contest has a theme of long exposure. Mike Thomas has described this perfectly for us in the September newsletter as a photo that is clear, long exposure, and gives several great examples such as light painting, streaks of car headlights, the silky motion of a waterfall, and many more. Keep in mind that even though contest and the resulting ribbons and rewards are for paid members of the Arundel Camera Club, spectators will benefit from the opportunity to view creative and unique photography, as well as hear judge comments on all the entries. On Wednesday, April 8th, we're changing things up a little bit, and we're going to be holding a special photo assignment and talk. You're going to have 3 assignments for you to pick from or attempt all 3, and starting tonight, you have 2 weeks. Our first photo assignment is thanks to our club president, who writes about one of his old Photography 101 assignments. Your assignment, if you so choose, is to take your camera in your bathroom and not come out until you've taken 75 photos. Keep them clean, please. The photos should be moderately different subjects and composition. This assignment will teach you how to work a scene and is meant to be difficult. We will create a Facebook post where people can post their first, middle, and last image in the set with a comment on what they learned during the assignment. Assignment number 2 is one that I've always enjoyed from my own education, and that is to photograph a white egg on a white background. In the spirit of the current situation, though, I propose that we replace the egg with a roll of toilet paper. You can use paper, foam core, or a white sheet for the background, and the assignment is meant to get you thinking about lighting. Light it from above, the side, the back, or straight on. Submit your best photo to the Facebook post on the assignment, and leave a comment on how you created the shot. Lastly, our third assignment will be a self-portrait inspired by Mike Thomas's post a few days on our group on self-portrait photography. Difficulty level is you've got to make the photo yourself. You've got to take the photo yourself with no help. Please submit it to the Facebook post on the assignment and tell us how you managed to make it happen. Each Facebook post outlining the assignment will describe the rules and the guidelines. All entries received will be displayed, as well as receive constructive comments and critique by a small panel of photographers or on our live stream Wednesday, April 8th at 7 p.m. Wednesday, April 15th, which was our print contest, has been turned into a program. And while the topic has yet to be determined, our print judge that night has graciously offered to create a presentation for us. Keep an eye on our Facebook page and the email list for details. And lastly, although we have a fundraiser night on the schedule for Thursday, April 16th at the Irish restaurant Brian Brew in Severna Park, Maryland, it's looking more and more unlikely to happen. With that said, this has always been a generous offer the restaurant has extended to our organization, and it would be fantastic if we can continue to support them. As of the last time we talked with them, they are offering takeout options on their delicious food. Give them a try. And a big thank you to everyone for joining us during these difficult times. And we only hope that by continuing our year virtually, we're helping to keep everyone creative and occupied with something that they love. That includes our club members, our Facebook group members, and anyone else looking for a creative outlet. Welcome. We're going to take a short break to get set up, and once we return, we'll be ready for tonight's presentation on design elements in photography with our very own David Joyner. Stay tuned.
Most of us, they enjoy good times over again in pictures. And now, here's Harriet.
If your family is like ours, you'll have as much fun together indoors as you do out. And now there's a new camera by Kodak that's just the nicest one I know to have around the house. It's the new Brownie Star Mic camera, the most compact indoor and outdoor camera in Kodak history. See, it's so small it fits right in the palm of your hand. The Star Mic camera was built with fun in mind. So handy, so easy to use because the flash is built in. Always there when you want it. These new flash bulbs are extra small, too, so they're easy to have handy when you want them. Now when you see something you'd like a picture of, just pop in one of those tiny flash bulbs and shoot. You'll get wonderful pictures in black and white, or color, or even gorgeous color slides.
See the Brownie Star Mic camera by Kodak. It costs less than $12. And start now to enjoy your good times over again in pictures.
I'm very proud to announce Arundel Camera Club's own David Joyner for tonight's presentation. David, welcome, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, John. Hopefully it'll be interesting to everyone.
Oh, I'm sure it is. These slides, the information you sent me is just fantastic, and you are the perfect person to give us these design elements in photography. Now, David, everyone in the club knows you for your stunning use of composition with architectural photography. Do you feel that your interest in mathematics is part to thank for your compositional eye?
Well, it's definitely related to my interest in abstract photography, and then from that, I mean, I guess composition. I think composition word comes from just experience, taking tons of photographs, and then just deciding I like this and I don't like that, and yeah, I'm not sure. There probably is a connection with the mathematics, but I'm not sure what it is.
Okay. Speaking of mathematics, I know you were a professor for the United States Naval Academy. Is that right? And how long?
Yeah, I was there for over 30 years, 31.5 to be precise. I probably have it down to the day. So, but yeah, I was there for a long time and overlapped with Howard Penn. Retired about a little over a year ago.
And so you did know Howard Penn before the Arundel Camera Club? Is that how you became involved in the club?
Yeah, I knew Howard liked photography. Our offices were not too far away, so when I ran into him, I knew he enjoyed that, and at some point, I was thinking I need some kind of hobby that would get me out and sitting down in front of a computer less. And so I talked to him, and he was very, very encouraging and friendly, as know, and so we talked a lot about cameras and what to do, and different ways to take pictures, and different kinds of equipment, and so I started taking. So ended up buying a Nikon D50. I think that was my first camera, and ended up then, instead of going out and spending less time in front of a computer, I ended up spending much more time in front of a computer, just editing photos.
So we're definitely glad he found you and got you involved in the club. For anyone that doesn't know, Howard Penn was one of our presidents for several years, and unfortunately he passed many years ago. And Howard had an amazing compositional eye as well, and just a great all around guy to really talk photography with. Well, David, do you enjoy shooting? Go ahead.
He was a real expert in nature photography.
Absolutely.
I think that was one of his big loves.
Do you enjoy shooting anything else besides architectural, David?
Well, I guess I'm trying to branch out into other things. Trying to branch out to portrait photography and learn more about lighting, and So I'm trying to do other things, but it's a steep learning curve for me. So I'm still learning.
Okay, and what kind of gear are you currently using?
So I started with a lot of Nikons. I had a D50 and a D300, D7000, had a lot of lenses, and then eventually, when the mirrorless boom hit, I decided, I really, I thought the thing to do is move over from Nikon, they were moving very slowly with mirrorless at the time. So I sold all my Nikon stuff and got Panasonics. I got I got a GH2 first, and then a GH4, and then it just isn't. The GH4 is an okay camera, but it just isn't very good with still. I mean, it's designed as a hybrid, so it's supposed to be okay with still, and it is very good with video. But so I just I made the decision that either stick with Panasonic and buy their super expensive S1, which it was just out of my budget, or go to Sony. So I thought long and hard, or go back to Nikon, but then that's also expensive, and their lenses are a little bit pricey for their full frame mirrorless.
Right.
So last summer I bought a Sony A7R III, and I'm pretty happy with that decision. It's a really nice camera.
Now, is there anything else you'd like to mention before we move on to your presentation tonight?
Well, maybe just the origin. I'll talk about it, I guess, a little bit during the talk, but basically, I read first about Itton's work in a book by Freeman, The Photographer's Eye, which is probably a book that a lot of our club members have. And then I thought it was a fascinating idea, and at the time I had a blog on Ipernity, which still exists, but it was kind of a rival to Flickr, and then it kind of burned out. It does exist, but basically the company that formed it went bankrupt, and so some other people kind of invested in it, but it's nothing like it was before. But they did have a very, very active group for a while. So I wrote a blog on this, and then you mentioned, John, maybe a year or so ago, that we should all kind of think about presentations. And if you offered, if you want, I'll discuss this with people, and we'll have a meeting over the summer. I guess this was last summer. And so I started working on it, and didn't really finish it up. But then when you mentioned this again, then I put a little bit more effort into it. So that's kind of the origin of it.
Excellent. Well, I'm really glad you did. I've thumbed through it, and it sounds very exciting, and I'm excited. I hope everyone else is. And let's get started. If you have any questions for David, what we'll do is at the end of the stream, if we have enough time, we'll ask people to hold their questions for the end, and then we'll field you some questions. Is that okay, David?
That sounds good.
Okay, well, David, I just want to kind of warn everybody at home that we are working similarly to how we had our digital contest. So, David, what I've got is I've got your title screen up on the stream, and if you want to go ahead and start whenever you want. Just let me know when to move to the next slide. Is that okay?
Okay, so let's just go to the next slide right away. So we're on this slide that kind of has a painting on the right side.
Correct.
Okay, so Itten was a teacher at the Bauhaus, and which is we could give a whole talk for days and days on the Bauhaus. But the Bauhaus basically was a school in Germany. Had Kandinsky, had Itten, had a lot of famous people, and Itten died, as you can see, in 1967. And this is one of his paintings there on the right. And he wrote several books. One of them was this design, which translated as Design and Form. He wrote the German version of that in 1963. And then he wrote another book on, I think, laws of color, if I remember right. And so this is basically some principles from his book, Design and Form. And I didn't buy the book. I mean, it's available on Amazon used for quite a lot of money. But I did look through the scanned version of it. And what he did instead of what I've done is, for an example of, let's say, many and few, would have a ink drawing, usually of a geometric object. So if it was, let's say, few, he might have a bunch of circles in one box and then circles in another box. So I've just decided, it might be more fun to have photos, and all the photos I used are my own photos. They're not the best photos. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying these are the photos that I've got copyright to, so I can use them. So that's anyway. That's the kind of the overall talk here. So we can go to the next slide.
Okay, I'm on.
All right. So the talk will basically be parts. It's not a terribly long talk, but there'll be two parts. First, 5 or 10 pages are going to be on examples of what he calls laws of form and shape. And these are along the lines of the rule of 1/3 rule that everyone knows for photography. It's along those lines. Those are these, that's the first part of the talk, these laws of form and shape. And in each case, the idea is that you're supposed to somehow balance the contrasting elements, and I'm kind of ignoring the balancing aspect. I'm just trying to show you an example of something with contrasting elements, and then you can decide whether I balance them properly or not. That's really kind of a matter of taste. But so for the next slide, we'll see it's another overview page.
There.
And so then the next group of the next part of the talk are going to be a bunch of these basic contrasts, and so we'll go through these laws of form first. That'll be like 5 or 10 pages with examples, and then we'll go through these basic contrasts, and there are quite a few pages there. There might be 20 or 30 pages there. Okay, the next slide is the Ferris wheel.
Proximity, correct.
Okay, so one of his laws is that nearby visual elements are grouped together in the mind. So, for example, the gondolas on the Ferris wheel form a circle, and the birds along the railing there form a line. So we circle in the line. That's the principal proximity. Slide is similarity. And here you can see bands of color. You can also see rows of windows going vertically. So the similar elements group us together. So we see these bands, and the bands form a group in our mind in the way that people observe patterns. The next one is on closure.
Mm-hmm.
You can see here a whole bunch of triangles. These books, I've tilted the photo obviously, so the books would be arranged in rectangles, but since I've tilted them, they're actually triangles here. So the books are actually grouped in these triangles. So you can see kind of the geometric aspect to this painting if you think about it that way, because when you see all these books collected like that, forming this triangular shape, see that the mind thinks triangle as opposed to a bunch of books. And the next one is simplicity. And here the mind prefers simpler compositional elements, and so here we're just seeing simple lines and colors and a single bird there to provide some interest. So that's another principle of form and shape. And then the next one is coordination. And here you can see in the left leg of both of these two baseball players, the left leg is blurred. The other parts of the body are, for the most part, sharp. So the left leg is moving, and you can see, I mean, the guy is jumping for a catch. The first baseman's jumping for a catch, and that's in sync with the runner running towards the base. So since we're seeing this implied motion, our mind thinks, oh, they're moving in sync. So that's coordination. And then the next example, separation. I think this was some that Christine Milliker brought, if I remember right, to a tabletop meeting. And here you can see the green, whatever it is. She's got these medical things, I guess they are. Green tube with green fluid. Anyway, the green is nice and separated, whereas the yellow and the red are not quite as attractive. They're kind of mushed together. So we like to perceive things separated as opposed to being mushed together. And the next one is continuation. Here we can see just rows and rows of tombstones, and they seem to kind of go on forever. It's no stopping point and ending point. That's one way that the mind forms continuity. Another way, in the next slide, there's a different kind of continuity. We see the shadow here, and we know there's a skater up in the air, and he's got his arms out because we can see that in the shadow, but it's not in the picture. So again, continuity. The mind wants to continue things out of frame, even though they're not really there. Okay, so that kind of ends the laws of form. There are all these laws of form that are all due to hidden. And we'll move on to basic contrast frame. And then if we can go through these pretty quickly. I'm listing in the next frame after that pairs, like point and line, area and line, plane and volume, and so on. And then the next page has more pairs, and then the next page has even more, and the next page has even more. And I've got examples of all these except for sweet and sour, and I couldn't really think of a sweet and sour that wasn't a food or something that would be too difficult for me to set up. So I don't have a sweet and sour, and I do actually have some others that were not listed. I guess as I was going through this talk and looking at the slides more carefully, I realized I didn't actually type all of them in there. Now, some of these are definitely due to hidden. I think some of them might even have been added by Freeman, and some of them I've added myself. But they're all hidden, basically. All right, so now we're just going to move on to the second part of the talk, was just giving you examples of the different contrasting elements. Okay, so here we can see a completely transparent glass and then some opaque ones. The dark blue and the light blue, they're different grades of opaqueness. Transparent versus opaque. And then the next slide, open versus closed. We can see kind of an open-ended part of the courtyard, and then this wall is closed. That's one way to think about it. Or you can think, we're open-ended in the courtyard, and then literally the door is closed at the end of the hallway. That's open versus closed. Then point versus line. One example is the water tower. You've got the skinny legs and a gigantic water tank on the top. And here I've got the example of the Space Needle, this very, very tall Space Needle. And then there's this, actually a restaurant. I've been up there. It's a pretty big restaurant at the very top of the Space Needle. And then that structure there just really holds an elevator, and then the legs of that hold it up. So that's point and line. Next one is pointed versus blunt. Got a pointed church spire. This is Washington Monument, Baltimore, and then that's got looks like a kind of a sharp top, and then the top of the Washington Monument is more blunted, point versus blunt. And diagonal versus circular. We see diagonal lines coming out. This is a long exposure, and then it's circular because this is a Day of Lights, Christmas season at the park, Sandy Point Park. So what it's called? You know what I'm talking about? That park is just outside of Annapolis, and cars can drive through, and they have these hoops of light. So if you just leave your camera shutter open and you drive through, you'll pick up these streams of light that way. So that's diagonal versus circular. And then the next slide is straight versus curved, and you just lines and curved lines. This is actually a reflection of a water fountain that's in an airport. I think WI, but I'm positive. That's straight versus curved. Next one is smooth versus rough. We see this very smooth background. It's actually an office building in Philadelphia. And then this kind of rough foreground. The statue itself has this rough shape. Then point versus area. We've got the point being the bird, and the area is just the flat wall, the kind of rectangular wall that the bird is sitting on. And then points versus area. So this is a collection of points, just raindrops. The background's out of focus. Raindrops on a window. And then area versus line is the next slide. So here the area I was thinking is just the surface area of this dome, and the lines are just the curves on the dome. In Washington, or it's in Roslyn, Virginia. So it's really just, it's within the Beltway in the southern part of the area. And then the next one is many versus few, and here you can use just tons of chairs, and then there's this one student studying one of the chairs, and this is Seattle Student Union looking down from where he's up. They have a whole bunch of chairs. As many versus few, and then much versus little. You can see there's a few red leaves, and the rest of the tree is all green. Much versus little. Area versus volume. Hidden also called this area versus body. Volume and body were the same. So here we can see the area being just a flat background here of a building. The blue stripes of the building, and then the foreground is actually lamps. So I've taken this at an angle, so this is really just an ordinary like street lamp. And this is in Columbia, not too far from the Columbia Mall. And line versus volume, here we can see this is actually a lamp. You can see the line is just the stem of the lamp, and the volume or just the lamp happens to have some glass bulbs on it. So that's the volume there. Next one is continuous versus intermittent. The black diagonals are these continuous lines, and then intermittent are these alternating colors of blue. There's blue and gray alternating. Intermittent form. Area versus volume, or as Inwood might say, area versus body. Here, the area I'm thinking of is really the texture of the granite along the surface here. That's one compositional element. And then in terms of volume, there's the heaviness of this massive concrete slab. This is actually part of a parking garage in Washington. So you got the weight versus texture in some sense, but it's expressed as area versus volume here. Then the next slide, slow versus moving. Basically, in this one, the first baseman is completely still. He's not moving at all. He's already got his hand set. He's just waiting for the ball to arrive. And of course, the runner's trying to beat the ball. He's not going to make the four guys out. Slow versus moving. Larger versus small. So I was thinking for this one, you've got this massive sculpture. This is near the water in Seattle. They've got this park with this gigantic metal sculpture. And then you can see these kind of normal-sized trees. These are not small trees, normal-sized. Big versus small things. I did some other examples of large versus small too. The next slide is also large versus small. But here I was thinking of the contrast between the guy who's jumping over the construction tape that's roped off and coming out of the area he's not supposed to be in. And that's compared to the massive reflection of this church that's kind of behind him. That's a contrast of small versus large. And then the next slide is also small versus large. Here you can see these massive pylons in the foreground, and then they just kind of become small in the background. So I just wanted to give a bunch of examples of this one just to point out there's lots and lots of ways design elements around. The next one is strong versus weak. I was thinking metaphorically, guard tower is kind of strong, and this or tree growing out of the wall. This is taken at the Eastern State, Philadelphia, is the weak. The slide is light versus heavy. This is almost kind of literal because the way this is part of a Galileo thermometer, the way they're designed is these floats here actually tell you the temperature of the room. So some of these floats are going to be light and some heavy. So it's maybe too literal. There might be better examples. That's one example of light versus heavy. The next slide is high versus low. Simple example of a skyscraper and then water in the foreground. High, water's low, or you could say sky is high and the skyscraper. Different example. The next example is hard versus soft. thinking hard versus soft kind of is like a texture type of example. So this is taken John Milliker's tabletop over the summer. For he had said, this is not real ice cream. Ice cream. I guess you had this pre set up, but anyway, this is an example of hard versus soft in kind of two ways. First of all, yeah, the ice cream is soft and the cone is hard, but in the way that I think Hidden intended, the foreground shot is soft, and because it's out of focus, and the background cone is hard because it's in focus. In fact, if we go to the next slide, I think I have another example. And so here we're seeing hard versus soft again. Its foreground is sharp, and the background is soft. And in fact, if you look at Hidden's book, when he says hard versus soft, he's got a solid circle, 10 circle, and then he's got a very diffuse circle with lots of dots.
Now we don't have, for some reason, that photo up on trademark.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why.
Maybe this is that's okay, but that's so it's really just something for him. I think it's something out of focus compared to something in focus. That was his intention with hard versus. And I put a food example in there as well, but I don't think he was intending soft ice cream versus hard shell of the cone. I think he was intending soft focus versus sharp focus. And the next slide is black versus white. And here a pretty simple example, contrast of black and white. And then next example is dark versus light. Dark is the shadows. They provide some contrast to the light there. And then solid versus liquid. This is kind of a trick shot that I took. This is another one of John Milliker's setups where there's actually a string that's holding the lime. Can't see the string, but there is a string that's lime up, and then there was just this fountain of water. So solid versus liquid. I guess that would be another example of soft versus hard as well. And then broad versus narrow. This is also kind of an example of line versus area, because you think of these thick red bands as kind of an area, and then the line is just wire that's going across it. But in terms of broad versus narrow, you could also look at this big red band going across as being broad, and then the silver pole that goes up to it that's narrow. So a couple ways of looking at the design elements. That's the end of the talk. You can see the references there, and I think the geometric ones, so points versus area, anything geometric like the diagonal versus circular, the point versus line, the plane versus volume. I like geometric elements popping out. Yeah. Well, the I guess once you decide the visual element you want to stress, that's how you should try to arrange them. So it's going to look less bizarre. I mean, you can do it in various ways, but if this is taken at an angle, so you really do have to use either Lightroom or GIMP or something to straighten it out, then you have to decide, are you going to straighten out the horizontal, or are you going to straighten out the vertical, or are you going to try to do both, where you're making sure they're perpendicular. So in Lightroom, you can either select it so there are two lines, and Lightroom will tell you, oh, these are now going, you're straightening these lines. Or you can pick one line vertically and then another line horizontally, and it'll make sure that they're perpendicular.
And Christine just let me know. I usually mute my mic when you're doing your presentation. You can hear me, but the stream can't hear me. But what I had asked David before the slide was, David is just an expert at picking these, getting lines just perfectly vertical or horizontal. And my question that he had answered, that you're going to hear that, how he gets those lines just.
Yeah, so Lightroom works great. There's I'm using cloud-based Lightroom, so there's a box over on the far right up in the corner, and you click on that, and then oh no, I'm sorry, you click on the same box that you're using if you're doing editing. It's up the very top right, and then when you finally get to the kind of the bottom, you scroll down to the bottom of that row of commands. Low sharpening is kind of a geometric tool, and you click on that, and that allows you to pick 2 points vertically, let's say, and then you can pick, and it'll draw a line between those 2 points, and then 2 other points vertically, and then it'll automatically make those 2 lines parallel. So it'll perspective warp your picture to make them draw. The other option is to pick 2 points, let's say vertically, then 2 other points horizontally, and then it will perspective warp your photo to make sure that those 2 lines are perpendicular. And it does that kind of magically. If you want to use GIMP to do that, you actually have to get into this perspective tool and then kind of warp it using the mouse, and you're kind of, if you put up a grid frame overlay on your photo and the mouse to kind of warp your photo, you can kind of try to get things as straight as possible, but it doesn't work as cleanly as Lightroom does.
David, something else I want to point out, you're really good at complementary and contrasting colors. Do you have anything you can talk to us about this? Again, we're still on the same photo with the just the beautiful golden light of the sun on this apartment building, and that one row in the back, which is just blue. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, in Lightroom, I don't think you can do too much other than kind of adjusting the blues versus the yellows and the greens versus the reds.
I'm talking more of just your vision. Just your vision. You saw this, and you put the golden lit part of the apartments. You've got one on the left, you've got one on the right, so you've got a perfect third here, and then you've got that blue. So I mean, I see it in a lot of your other images as well, where you just automatically, your eye automatically just picks these images that just have these great color combinations.
Well, I think it's just taking a ton. I mean, I've taken a ton, and then I look at them in thumbnail and Lightroom usually, and then just pick out the ones that I think are going to eventually lead to something. But just taking a gigantic number of photos.
Gotcha.
Every time I go out, I mean, I'll oftentimes have 300 photos of just basically one place. And then, if I move into a different place, I'll take it even more. But, so if I was going, let's say, to the Inner Harbor or something, I'm just standing in one place, I might take a gigantic number of photos to read through them.
I've got a photo online now of the skateboard. It's your slide continuation to. It's the shadow of the skateboarder. And Susan on chat posts that she likes the photos of the subject and its reflection, and she likes the skateboarder with his shadow. Now, is that something did you photograph specifically the shadow, or did you crop down to just include the shadow?
For the most part, I was, telling the guy I wanted to shoot him. This was taken in Port Angeles in Washington State, and just a young teenager. I was telling the guy I wanted to shoot him, and I really was trying to get his shadow.
Excellent.
Because I was a little bit afraid. He was a young kid. I was a little bit afraid that he might be freaked out if I'm taking his photo. But I thought, you can't mind if I'm taking a picture of his feet in the shadow. He was really happy to do that.
If we have any other comments specifically, does anybody have any comments specifically on any of the slides that we'd like to maybe ask David a bit more? Keep in mind, we've got probably about a 20. Susan also comments that she personally likes when you have to work between two parts of an image. What is in total and what is in missing? Was that David?
It was just a lot of fun. I wanted to thank you for the opportunities. And one thing I was wondering if people would be interested, or you in particular, John. There is this other book by Iden called, I think, Laws of Color, and it would take me maybe a year, but I could go through that book and see what kind of photography aspects he's discussing in that book, and maybe give another presentation for maybe in next year.
Hey, absolutely. My thoughts on that. I think that we have such amazing talent in the club that really everyone could present on something, and we would never run out of topics. Well, David, I really want to thank you for sharing all this with us. This was eye-opening. The chat loves it, and it really gives an idea. We have had a couple comments of people saying, "Well, now I kind of know why I like things that I really can't describe them." Would you be up to taking some questions?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Excellent. Let's see. We get some questions in here. Oh, let's see. I'm trying to scroll back. Mike Thomas is asking, what's your favorite place to shoot?
Well, I really like, in terms of Baltimore, I really like the whole Mount Royal, Mica area. That whole area I really like a lot. Just tons of, they're not just beautiful homes, but there's lots of beautiful buildings. Mica has that Brown Center, that glass pyramid type shape there, and then and there are just a ton of cool buildings in the Mount Royal area around Mica, the Maryland Institute College of Art. In terms of DC, I think I like the Roslyn area. So it's kind of the southern, really Crystal City, Roslyn. That area's got a ton of really cool buildings, I think.
You like the Building Museum down in DC?
I think it's okay.
Okay.
It's pretty classical, but just walking around on the mall is nice if you've got a nice telephoto lens, because the buildings there are pretty cool. There's a National Museum of the American Indian, which has got just gorgeous curves to it. So there are a lot of really nice buildings around the mall area.
I have a question from Mary Lou. What is the digital versus line photo of? Let me see if I can find that one. Diagonal versus line, not the digital versus line.
Oh, so that's you go to, it's only at Christmas time. It's Sandy Point State Park, is that right?
I'm not sure if she's talking. Mary Lou, are you talking about the diagonal versus circular image? I don't see
the diagonal versus circular.
Okay.
Right, that's Sandy Point State Park. once a year for maybe 10 days or so. You pay to get in. You drive your car around this route, and they'll have lit displays. And sometimes they're Christmassy, and sometimes they're not. And this one was just a bunch of arcs that go over this road that you drive along, and there might be, I don't know, 20 or 30 of them, and they're kind of identical. And then I guess they have either kind of Christmas lights strung along them or something like that. And you just hold the shutter open. And I did it as long as my wife would permit me to go back and forth over the same road. Eventually, she said, "We're going to stop this now." Go home.
Is the Sandy
but
Point?
you keep doing it, and eventually you're going to get a good shot. And a lot of the times it's not going to work. But,
I've only been there once. Is the Sandy Point holiday display? Is that something that you can go through a couple times, or can you stop and get out if you wanted to set a tripod up? What are the rules?
I don't know if you can. No, I don't know if you can stop just because cars are going.
Gotcha.
You can't really stop, but you can keep. And so you go, and then you circle around, and you go again, and you circle around. So the best way is to have someone else drive, and then you're just kind of shooting like mad.
Perfect. Now I know Ocean City, Maryland's got one as well, but they put you through a tram, and you can photograph from the outside of the park. So if you've got a tripod and a long lens, you can really pick out different things. But absolutely, the motion on this slide is just fantastic. Do we have any other questions in the chat? Let's feed let's pick David's brain and feed him some good questions, because I think this is just an amazing treat to have David here talking about his architectural work for us, because as I said, his architectural photography is just absolutely amazing. I think we have anything else, David? Do you have anything specifically you want to talk about? Any of the slides you'd like to go a little bit more in detail? Actually, I'll tell you one thing I'd like to go into more detail is your line versus volume with the 4 glass balls of the lamp.
Oh, right.
Do you know which one I'm talking about? I think that's of all your images, I think that's the most stunning, because not only do you have the 2 different tonalities in the background,
and I don't remember, what this is. It might be a bank or something, but you cannot see these lights here from the road. You have to actually get out, park, and then you'll see the building itself from the road, but to actually see that, that spot, you actually have to get out and walk up to the bank, and I just took a ton of them just shooting up, and they seem so unworldly. I just saw it. Just not really earthy. It's kind of fantastic.
It is. Looks. Have you ever gotten any strange looks, or anybody come up to you when you're photographing weird things in banks?
No, just cops telling me to you can't do that, that kind of thing. So there's a nice building near the mall. It's right across from the hospital. Got these arches on the roof, and there's a lot of glass to it, and I've not been able to get up close to that. I mean, basically, even when there's no one, even on a Sunday, I've tried, and the local security just away. So that those kind of things are usually the worst.
We have another question. Do you like working with tabletop images? And I have 2 images here that I know of. That actually, I've got 3 images here that I can bring up. I've got the glass things on the light box, which by the way is actually Bob's stuff. We also know that Bob's got all the crazy glass stuff. I also have your transparent versus opaque slide, and I also have your light versus heavy. I can bring either of those up if you'd like to talk a little bit more about your tabletop.
Well, I think all those were taken during maybe the transparent versus opaque might have been taken at my house, but otherwise, I think they were taken at the tabletop night. The transparent versus opaque. That my wife's got this table that's just a mirrored top, so it's lots of fun to put glass stuff on top of that and then just take pictures of reflection. I mean, I can't tell you how many hundreds of photos I've taken on that table. And some of them turn out okay, like this one, but a lot of them don't work. So you just got to keep practicing, practice.
Now we have a question from Susan, and she is asking in the line versus volume, the 4 glass balls on the lamp. She's asking if you can explain how come the colors are reversed on.
4 glass. Oh, that one. Line versus white. Okay. The colors are reversed because this is actually a lamp in our living room, and my wife and I decided when we painted this to have one wall. We didn't have all the walls painted the same color. We wanted two tones, and so I put this very carefully aligned in the corner on a table, and then everything's shot on a tripod. So I just made sure that half of the blue wall and the gray wall, and then I put this thing right in so you can't see the corner of the wall. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And then I took the shot, and you can see the blue wall is reflected on the blue wall, which is on the right of the photo, is reflected in the left side of the balls. That's just a property of refraction in glass.
Mm-hmm.
And then the gray wall is reflected in the gray wall, which is on the left, is reflected along the right side. I just thought that effect was cool.
And to blow your mind even more, Susan, take a look at the reflection of the chrome column in the balls. Of course, the balls are refracting that light differently, but the chrome column does not lie. And so it's such an amazing line of just color after color after color. It's a fantastically seen image.
Thank you. You really should thank my wife for getting these unusual things for me to take pictures of.
That's fantastic. Do we have any other question? Question for Dave. Is the book authored by Litton still in print?
It is in the English edition. It's in print. Well, it's used. I mean, I guess it's not in print. You can only buy used copies. So I actually don't own a copy because it was a little on the expensive side for me. Everything I needed I could kind of find by going through the scans that you can find online.
Is that like Google, Google Books, or even Project Gutenberg might have it?
I think you're right. So most of my information actually comes from Freeman, who discussed it in good detail. Freeman's book, Photographer's Eye, and then for details, I just checked the scans. But I actually didn't read that book. Now the Idden's book on color, not super expensive. So I was thinking.
Okay. What do you have a year on the on Freeman's book?
That's a recent book.
Okay.
It's on the last page. Oh, no, it's not on the last page, is it? It's a recent book, so I'm guessing in the 2000s.
I'm going to bring it up right now. Photographer's Eye. Michael Freeman, The Photographer's Eye, online. It is available online. It's actually available as a Kindle book as well. Maybe we can do a little reading assignment for everybody if you highly recommend that book.
Oh yeah, that would be a lot of fun. He's great. And
then maybe we could do a little conference call or a panel between whoever read it and whoever would like to speak on it, and maybe that could be an idea for a future live stream.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool.
I'm checking to make sure. Okay, Bob. We'll talk about Bob's question. Bob is asking if this is something you can provide for. Asking if we can provide the PDF of your presentation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I think I sent you a link, but I'll just send a link to the members. Does that sound good?
That's something we can do. Or another thought is if you would like this, and of course I didn't want to assume, I didn't want to put words in your mouth, but if you have no problem with sharing this as the PDF, we can host it on the Facebook page as well. We've actually had quite a few people that are Facebook group members, but they're not club members, so therefore they won't have access to the email list.
Yeah, if you can do that, that'd be great.
Perfect. We'll do that for you. I'm checking for last call on any question. See, I'm just gonna give a last call and then wrap this up. David, what have you been shooting lately? Have you been you've been stuck kind of inside like the rest of us? Anything you've been personally working on?
No, just shots of some just stuff in the backyard, and then I've recently bought as an experiment. These light pointers that people use, judges use to point. You can get them in different shapes. They're actually sold as cat toys, for cats to play with the lights. Anyway, I bought a bunch of them. And another thing my wife does, she likes to collect these kind of little tiny glass sculptures. So I've been trying to take pictures of those with the, thinking of the light pointers as kind of like strobe lights, except they're tiny. And I'm not terribly successful at it. I still need to work on it. Taking pictures of glass is really tricky. So that's that's something I'm trying, but I'm not really very successful at so far.
I don't want to spoil it, but Mike Thomas has some amazing images. I think he's either thinking of submitting for long exposure next week, or I'm not entirely sure if he has or hasn't, but he displayed those for us at our last meeting, which was the photography talk, and he's got some really interesting thoughts on doing similar. He's not refracting them through any glass, but definitely get in touch with him, what he's been doing, because his stuff's been good. Or keep an eye on the digital photography contest. I have a feeling he may be submitting one or two of those, which I hope he does.
Sounds good.
Let's see. I don't see any other questions, so we can wrap this up. David, thank you so much for being with us and giving us your time and your experience. Everyone in chat, thank David for us.
Thanks for the inspiration, John. Appreciate it.
Oh, well, I'm glad you were able to do something that just blew everybody away, because this is something that's usually not the norm for us, thinking about such elemental thoughts on photography. It's great. Michelle has already mentioned something in the chat. This Facebook live stream will stay up. We will also edit the stream, edit the ramp up in the beginning, and we'll put that on YouTube as well. And we will. David has allowed us to put the PDF of this presentation on our Facebook page as well. And David, thanks again, and thanks everybody for joining us. Again, we will be back.
Thanks, John.
Yes, we'll be back next week, same time, Wednesday, April 1st, 7 p.m. Eastern, for our digital photography contest on the theme of long exposure. Now, again, because we give out awards and ribbons, this is something that is only open to paid members of the Arundel Camera Club, but we have several people that have come to the meetings, that have looked at our live streams and said that they're getting a lot of information out of it. They're seeing a lot of great photography, and they're seeing what the judges are commenting on that photography. So it's good, even if you're not submitting photos. But once again, we'll thank David, and we're going to head out, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, David.
Okay. Bye-bye.